All right, 20th century. We're going to talk a little bit about the Progressive Era, and the time period is usually regarded from 1890 to 1920. I'm trying to figure out where the camera is. Yeah, it's there. Okay. When you think about progress, what do you think about? Obviously, you think about things progressing, getting better. We have a lot of politicians today that call themselves progressive. And in some ways, there may be some similarities, but there's more differences than there are similarities between this group and the group of today. But anyway, we'll get into that more later on. At the turn of the century, we're really getting into the 20th century now. At the beginning of the 20th century, there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of things that are wrong with America. There's always been problems, issues. People, as we've said many times, the Bible tells us we're all sinful. And people left up to themselves will naturally do things that benefit themselves. And so we're going to see one of the things, not just the robber barons, but even after the robber barons, there's still some major issues with the corporations that are just now getting underway and growing and what have you. So anyway, there's corporate greed. There's, again, this cartoon really shows big business and how they stand atop everything else. And they're such gluttons, and they're so getting to be such a fat cat, if you will. They have just grown and grown and grown. And there needs to be some intervention. There needs to be somebody that will control them. Today, we do have in place a government system that does monitor and make sure that everybody treats everybody fairly, at least attempts to. You're always going to have incidences when that doesn't happen, when people don't treat each other fairly. But for the most part, because of the Progressive Era and because of the Great Depression, we're going to see a lot of government intervention. But at the beginning of the 20th century, those 30 years that I've just had up there, government pretty much had what they called, and I'm going to show you this a little bit more later on, but had what they referred to as laissez-faire attitude. Keep your hands off of business, especially. Don't mess with business. Let business do whatever they're pretty much wanting to do. Well, whenever you do that with anybody, you're going to end up with abuse of power. You're going to end up with people taking advantage of the situation. And that's what's going to be happening at the beginning of the 20th century. One of the problems was child labor. And we looked at this a little bit before. But this picture shows you, these are young children that are working barefooted on this machinery. Oftentimes they would get hurt. Oftentimes they would end up losing a leg, an arm, and then they would also lose their job. And obviously, of course, if they're working like this, then they're not going to school. So they're not getting an education. It's another picture that shows you some of these young boys that are working in some type of a plant. And of course, this is probably their boss, and he's making them work. Another problem, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, was the fact that some processing plants were not making sure that the food that they canned for the people was going to be good and sanitary and not full of germs and disease and pieces of mice and rats and all this other good stuff that we talked about before. But, there's going to be, this picture shows Housewives Alliance demands proper inspection of meat. They wanted their meat processing plants to be inspected regularly by the government. And this was not something that the government did. They didn't do it at all. Wrong way. Also, women wanted the right to vote. Until 1920, women did not have the right to vote. White men could vote, black men could vote. They probably didn't because there were secret laws and the black codes in the South and all the different ways in which of intimidation that they put on black men to not allow black men to vote, especially in the South. Not so much in the North and not so much out West, but women did not have the right to vote. And so, these are called suffragettes because they're wanting suffrage. They want the right to be able to vote. That is a term you're going to have to know. We'll get to it here in a minute. Women's suffrage. Votes for women. Women actually had to protest and voice their complaints about not being able to vote. Oh, now one of the ironic things about women voting is some of the states out west, especially Wyoming and some of the other western states, granted women the right to vote before anybody else did. As a matter of fact, there's going to be a woman, and I think it is from Wyoming. Her name was Jeanette Rankin, and she was the first woman to be elected to Congress, and she was actually in Congress, serving in Congress from, I'm pretty sure it was Wyoming. I need to verify that and double check it, but before women could vote, she was actually in Congress representing a western state. But of course, the sign says, "We were voters out west. Why deny our rights in the east?" And of course, they are picketing for the right to vote, for suffrage. Also, education is going to be a problem. Now, if you notice this picture, these people are all well dressed. They're clean. They all look, their hair is just fixed just right. They're wealthy. These children come from wealthy families. Only the wealthy were able to get education because, remember, most of the poor children were working. And so they wanted to get education reform. They wanted to make it to where children could have a free and public education. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I do want you to be aware that that's also very dangerous. You guys know when you're in class, you are a captive audience. There's oftentimes, I know you're listening to me, that you would rather be doing something else, probably like even right now. But teachers have to be very careful about what they teach. And because really this group of people and all the children that are in the classes, they're the next generation. And so we have raised up a generation now in America that have been to public schools where for the most part God has been excluded, and the Bible and teachings about God and teachings about the Bible. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing so many issues and so many problems in our society today, is we've raised up a group of children that now are young adults that have no idea about what the truth is. The Bible says you shall know the truth and the truth will set you free. These people don't know the truth, and you can see what an effect it's having on our society and on our culture and on our country. And again, I just want to stress the fact that we need to be praying for our country, and I hope you're doing that, because God is really in control. No matter how crazy it may seem and may look, God is in control, but I think He expects His people to pray, and we need to pray for our country, because we have a group of people now that have been raised up that don't know the truth. And it's kind of scary, really. But education is important. But remember the foundational part about education. Your parents are the ones who have the right and the say-so in your education. That should never be denied. Right now there's questions in some of these big cities about where leaders of educational movements are saying that the parents don't have any right to control what their children are being taught in schools. Well, that is foolishness. if you don't teach your children while they're children, you're not going to be able to teach them what you want them to know once they're no longer children, once they're adults. You have to teach them while they're young. What you guys are learning here at MCA, I hope you'll take it to heart, because we are attempting to, at every turn, to pass on to you the truth. And we live in a world today where they want to say there is no truth, where it's only true if you want to accept it as true. Well, that's foolish. I mean, if you just stop and think about it, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Truth is truth. Anyway, so education is very important. Your education is very important. And just keep in mind, one of the things I emphasize too, especially as juniors and seniors, but you guys are juniors, your education is limited by you and you alone. You have, right now you're remote, we're remote. So you can kick back, you can sleep in a little, you can, eat nachos and have one eye on the TV and one eye on your video game and another eye, I don't know where you're getting 3 eyes, but anyway, and another thought on your schoolwork. Don't do that to yourself. Realize that your education is important. History is important. Understanding who we are. One of the reasons why I started this off explaining that we're in a movement today where people are calling themselves progressive, but they're not wanting this type of progress. They are wanting a total and complete overthrow of the type of system that we have used in America for over 200 years. And we need to recognize that, realize that, and be able to fight against it. Anyway, education reform was a big part of it. I didn't mean to preach. Another part was alcohol abuse. Nothing new there. That's been around for a long, long time. The Old Testament even talks about men having trouble with alcohol. But there was going to be a movement in the early 20th century, mostly led by women, not all women, but mostly led by women, to end the abuse of alcohol. And so we are going to have a period of time when alcohol is banned. And of course, because it was banned, nobody drank and everybody was happy. Yeah, you know better. It just became a black market for it, an underground market for it. But anyway. And of course, election fraud was another big thing. This kind of explains a lot about, this cartoon explains somewhat of what I'm trying to say about the ballot and the election fraud. In counting, there is strength. Well, of course, in counting, there is strength. Here you've got this fat cat, another one like the robber baron. But here you've got another guy here, and he's going to count the votes until they turn out what he would call right. In other words, until they turn out his way. We have some of that going on in America now. That's nothing new. Been around a long time, election fraud. But now we should be able to, with all of our new technology and our way in which we do things, we should be able to eliminate a lot of this. And of course, like I said, this was nothing new. This was going on back in the 1900s, early 1900s. But there is going to be a movement to try to stop that. Anyway. Okay. The reformers. What did they really want to do, and who were they? Reformers. Now, it looks like you've got a glare on that. I hope you can see it. It's kind of late in the day, and the sun's coming in at an odd angle. But reformers were progressives who wanted social and political change. Social. What does that mean? Society, education, alcohol, anything to do with your social structure. Okay, social and political change. They wanted the government to change. They wanted the government to not be so laissez-faire, hands off. They wanted the government to be more involved. So these three things I want you to know. They wanted to fix government. They wanted to create a better education society. And I know there's a glare on that, but that says better education. Open for free for poor and rich. They wanted more direct democracy, and I'm going to explain that here in a minute. more direct democracy, and they wanted the government to be more involved, more government intervention. Okay, so be sure you get all three of those. And again, the government was acting in this fashion, laissez-faire. This is what I want you to write down. LAISSEZ hyphen FAIRE. Okay? To be laissez-faire means that the government has its hands off of business. And hang on, I'm going to go the right way one of these days. And they being the progressives, wanted to do away with the laissez-faire. They wanted the government to be involved. So non-laissez-faire was what they were wanting. And this was the way they wanted to do it. So take a minute and just write all these down. And actually, I want you to look them up in your book. I'm going to stop. I'm going to do a short video, believe it or not. And I know you think, well, they're sitting short. It's short for me, you know it is. Look up direct primaries, the secret ballot, what's an initiative, what's a referendum, what's a recall, what is trust busting, and who are the muckrakers. Okay, and then once you do that, I also want you to take notes on these 4 amendments. These 4 amendments are known as the progressive amendments, and you'll need to know them. Okay, so I am going to go over these real quick. I'll go back. Well, you can go back. You can reverse it, can't you, to where you can go back and look at that other slide. Okay. There's going to be 4 amendments added to the Constitution during the Progressive era, and they're called the Progressive Amendments. The 16th started today what we have income tax. And you know your parents, and possibly even you if you're working, you have to pay yearly, you have to pay a tax on the amount of money you have coming in, your income, the money that you make. You have to pay tax on that. Well, see, if you're going to get the government to be more and more involved in your life, they don't give you their money. The government leaders, they don't cough up their money. As a matter of fact, they're going to probably make more money while they're in office than they did when they were not in office. But they've kind of lost the idea of being a civil servant. But income tax, they had to raise revenue to pay for all these new programs that they're going to do. And that's always the case. And we're seeing that right now. The government is talking about handing out all of this free stuff to all these people. Well, it's not free. Somebody somewhere is going to pay for it. And it's going to be the people that are working. It's going to be the working class people that their taxes will increase. Okay, so income tax. The second one, or the 17th one, the number 17, direct election of senators. In the Constitution, when it was originally written by our founding fathers, they made it to where our two houses of Congress, one, the House of Representatives, was directly elected by the people back in their states. So, for us today in West Virginia, our representative in Congress is Carol Miller. She was elected by the people on the ballot when we voted for president. Okay, but the senators were not chosen that way. Now today they are. Today, when you go to vote, you've cast your ballot for your representative and you cast your ballot for your senator, depending on if their term is up, but that's another story. But originally, all senators in Washington, not in Charleston, not in Richmond, all senators that went to Washington, they were chosen by the state senators, like out of Charleston, out of Richmond, out of whatever state, Raleigh, out of the state capital. They would pick the senators, the political leaders of the state, basically, would decide who was going to be the political leader in Washington. Now, they wanted to change that, and the 17th Amendment does change that. it makes it to where people vote for not just their representative, but now they also vote for their senator. So that's pretty important, because that had a direct effect on putting more direct democracy into the hands of the people. And then the 18th Amendment, they prohibited alcohol. You couldn't make it, you couldn't buy it, you couldn't sell it, you couldn't drink it. All of that was prohibited. Of course, that just opened up a new market for bootleg whiskey and moonshine and the black market, and, you know, speakeasies were bars where, you know, they wouldn't let everybody in, and they made sure that police couldn't get in so that they could sell their alcohol. But still yet, prohibition was designed to make man do something right. And you're going to find that oftentimes it doesn't work that way anyway. You cannot legalize, really, morality. Morality comes from within, and it comes from within when we have Christ living in us and the Holy Spirit guiding us, directing us, convicting us of sin, teaching us how to live. You just can't mandate that. I mean, it's not going to work. People will find a way around it. And so you cannot mandate it. But anyway, they tried for a while. Now later on, there's going to be another amendment that is going to amend the amendment. 21st Amendment said the 18th Amendment doesn't exist anymore. I think I told you once before, if there was a change or an addition to the Constitution, you couldn't just go in and scratch it out of the original document. You had to add an amendment to the document to fix the part in it that was wrong. And then the last one, the 19th Amendment, gave women the right to vote. So, ladies, that's our amendment. So those are known as the Progressive Amendments. You will need to know them. Now let's see, I think that's it, yeah. Okay, I'll go back to that. Make sure you write these down and know what they are, okay? Now what I would like to do, I want you to go through the chapter. You need to start reading your chapter on the progressives, and of course define these things and think about them. And then what I would like to do by Friday, this will be for you on Wednesday. And so by Friday, I'd like to do an online test. Okay? So, and I would prefer that you didn't use your notes. That would be cheating. But we'll kind of review. I'll get with you some way on Thursday and we'll review again. But I would rather you just took the test, open brain. I know there's no way I can keep you from cheating. You have to make that decision on your own. I mean, and you're going to be confronted with that all your life. But I would prefer that you didn't. And let's just see how you do. And I'll make this deal with you. How about them apples? If you take the test and you do bad, just too terrible, I'll let you take it again next week in person with me in class. And that way, if you do badly on it, then it'll just be like a pretest and it'll just be like a review. But I'm hoping we can count it. But if you take it and you do it honestly and you've studied and you can take it open brain, no notes, no book, on Friday, see, that gives you Wednesday for the lesson, Thursday to study, and Friday to take the test. Like I said, then if you really do badly on it, and if you want to retake it, I will let you. Okay, so that should encourage honesty, I hope. Okay, so I think that's it.